Hey, good morning.
Wow, your house at Halloween looks like the cast of Gandhi. You ran out of candy at 1,300 trick-or-treaters.
We did. It gets bigger every year, and I think I have to go. And I was out by like 7 o'clock, 7:15. It starts earlier every year. Maybe it was because it was Sunday. Kids start showing up
Yeah,
around 3:30.
I saw the video. You live in Mayberry. It looks. I don't know why, Eric. I thought it was because I'm the weird lady, that they
Yeah.
assume has razor blades and the apples but nobody trick or treats in our neighborhood. No, I thought it was just my house. Nobody, just neighbor Doug can tell you. Why don't we have trick or treaters? We never have.
30 years. 30 years I have never had a trick or treat.
16 years I've been here. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not. So I thought it was because of me. It was because the weird lady, the weird single lady.
Just real quick, like the street I live on has become like this destination street. Then everyone else gets very frustrated. I understand, like other people in town are like, nobody ever, we live in the exact same type of street. Nobody shows up anymore. I used to get 100. Now I get 4 because everybody goes to one street. I don't know how it happened.
We're in Hollywood. They probably want a 3-picture deal. They don't want a Snickers. They're like, no, candy. What? Okay. Eric, oh my God. I know every week I can't wait to talk to you, but I just started the show. I don't know. We were just raging at, the media they seem also gleeful that Biden's numbers are down. And how could they not be down with relentless coverage? I feel like I'm in upside down world. Like we have not gone from 1% to 80% vaccinated, cut childhood poverty in half. We are on the verge of transformational legislation, which will get passed. And the news is just relentlessly negative. And then they're like, oh, look at his approval rating, right?
Yeah, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, obviously. And we've talked about it before. It started in August with the Afghanistan story, and the press really just shifted gears. And then everything became a crisis. I mean, I'm chuckling because, the United States' relationship with a crisis with France, that was a crisis last month. And Biden went over and patched everything up. But so they start looking for a laundry list. Everything is a crisis. The economy is a crisis. Oh, okay. Well, the stock market just passed 36,000. The unemployment is at 4.8%. Consumer spending is up. So all the normal metrics that the media use for measuring an economy under a presidency are great under Biden. So the press shifts and says, oh, inflation. Oh, the supply chain. That's the real crisis here.
You're the only person that makes me feel like I'm not taking crazy pills, Eric, that I'm just like, well, I mean, for instance, on the Virginia race coverage, you said, do you remember this kind of breathless what-if coverage in advance of the Georgia runoff elections in January when Republicans faced the prospect of losing 2 U.S. Senate seats in a red state? I don't. In fact, much of the Beltway media simply assumed that Republicans would prevail. I mean, we had this breathless coverage here in California. And then Newsom wins by a bigger landslide than he won originally. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in Virginia. It's obviously close, but it's very just close. You can feel the breathless rooting for the Democrats in disarray kind of storyline.
Oh, yeah. So the Virginia race has been completely nationalized. I mean, if McAuliffe wins, if McAuliffe loses, Biden loses. They're absolutely one and the same. So it's a huge story because this is a relatively blue state that has a governor election this year. Well, there's another very large blue state with a governor race this year, and it's in New Jersey. And Phil Murphy's going to become the first Democrat to win re-election in 50 years. That's not a barometer of anything, apparently, in terms of the strength of the Democratic Party or Joe Biden. It's only a barometer. It's only news if a Democrat might do poorly. And I keep going back to the January, runoffs in Georgia. Those were 2 red state Senate races. And right after the November election, the DC press just assumed Mitch McConnell. Hang on. Assumed Mitch McConnell.
It's the mainstream media calling. We're sorry, Eric. You were right about everything. All right, I'm just filling in what I'm hoping the call's about.
Assumed Mitch McConnell was going to be the Senate Majority Leader. And because, of course, Republicans were going to win the Georgia runoff seats because they always win runoffs, and it's a red state, and so there's no big story here. So it's amazing that it wasn't this breathless coverage in Georgia, and they ended up losing both. And then how many stories did you see of dissecting how the Republican Party possibly lost Arizona and Georgia in the same cycle? It wasn't a big deal. It didn't reflect on the party,
Well,
and it certainly didn't reflect on Trump.
yeah, I mean, and historically, I mean, Republicans have won every time in Virginia, the governor's race, when there's the opposite party in the White House. But as you say, Dems in disarray Olympics. Hands down, the favorite part of the hysterical piece is right when they talk about Jersey, which Dems will win in a walk, and somehow frame it as a problem for Democrats. I mean, everything is a problem for Democrats, including, I keep saying this, the coverage of the legislation. Do you remember, Eric, when we were like, everyone was like, why didn't they should have started with single payer for the ACA negotiations? And now we're seeing the same negotiation, and they did do that. They started high, and we're going to end up with something that is still fantastic and transformational. But it's already framed as a loss because it's been negotiated for too long in public, and now the Democrats look like they're not getting anything. And I mean, it's right. I mean,
it's too messy. So we're already seeing coverage. Well, it's going to pass on Tuesday now. Everyone seems to agree, and it's certainly not being portrayed as a Biden victory. It's certainly not being portrayed as Biden passing not only first a massive COVID relief bill without a single Republican vote, now passing a massive spending bill probably without a single Republican vote. No president has successfully ever passed these types of legislation without a single vote from the other party. You'd have to go back to Obamacare, of course. Biden's now going to basically pass 2 Obamacares in 8 months in terms of these huge bills with no support from an obstructionist Republican Party. But it's certainly, he is not going to be praised for 5 minutes. There's going to be no, look at how he pulled off this miraculous thing. It's all going to be, well, it took too long and it was messy and
just like Afghanistan,
It all got scaled back. It doesn't mean anything anyway.
Right.
Well, universal pre-K is a pretty big deal. $200 billion to guarantee pre-K for every 3 and 4-year-old in this country will transform American education. And it's being dismissed, and it's basically being ignored because the press is still obsessed with the cost and the vote counting. That's all they care about.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, speaking of Trump, the thing about his fundraising, and you said they miss him so much. Breathless coverage of his fundraising numbers. No mention that he's trying to destroy free and fair elections in America, or that he wasn't legitimately elected and he was impeached for cheating twice. I mean, it's just that this is normal politics. Sports, coverage is just unbelievable.
Yeah, so that was this big fawning Washington Post piece over the weekend. Oh my God, he raises so much money. Oh my gosh, he's reinventing the way you run for re-election after you lose and things like that. So you pointed out that large Washington Post red flags piece, multimedia. They spent a lot of time and resources. Good for them. That's good. But it doesn't do any good if your day-to-day news coverage, you cover Trump, you don't even include one sentence about the insurrection. If you publish these fawning pieces about how much money he raises, and there's not a sentence about, he's trying to destroy free and fair elections in America. So if you got to do both. If you're going to do these red flags, if you're going to raise the concern about insurrection and political violence, it has to be in all the coverage. It can't just be one.
And also include Republicans charging rightly that he's going to use all the money for himself. And his legal fees, he's not even using money he's raising for Republicans or to investigate election fraud because he knows there isn't any. I mean, it's okay. Right. Anyway, your piece about critical race, fantastic. You said critical race theory fight exposes massive journalism failure. You said what the media have uniformly failed to do in Virginia and nationwide as deep-pocketed right-wing activists march on with their manufactured outrage over critical race theory is forcefully point out that it's not taught in schools, period. When pressed, most Republican parents, politicians, and activists aren't even able to explain what CRT is. Thank you. And they just continue to cover this. You said the whole thing represents a stunning failure of American journalism. The news outlets defy common sense. It's the latest example of the media working hand in hand with Republicans to spread nonstop misinformation and to make issues things that aren't issues, right?
Yeah, and the problem is, this was a big deal over the spring and the summer. The reason I circled back to it is it's now clearly part of the Youngkin campaign.
Virginia.
If he wins, it's probably going to be because of this phony CRT issue. And all indications, Republicans are going to use this as the 2020 midterm strategy. And the press is just going to keep going along with it. I mean, it is just mind-boggling. You know, there are two things that no one has ever explained to me. In 4 years of Trump, I never saw a single journalist defend why they refused to call him a liar in the press coverage.
Yeah.
And this critical race theory, I simply have not seen a single journalist explain why they basically ignore the fact that it's not being taught. Or if, you know, as I mentioned in my piece, New York Times maybe puts it in the 18th paragraph. You know, educators say it's not taught. I mean, my gosh, I mean, if there was this ultra left crusade, you know, against schools because they're teaching the moon was made of cheese, I'm pretty sure that would be in the first paragraph of every sentence, saying these delusional people are making up claims about public education. But and real quick, so my point with CRT is the lie is so brazen that it works because reporters are programmed to focus on whatever right-wing activists are talking about, whatever they're angry about.
Yeah.
And so, but they're too afraid to point out that they're lying.
Yeah.
And so this CRT thing, the idea of critical race in 10th grade in this country is false. But the press is just way more interested in the controversy it creates. And they're too afraid to say, oh, by the way, they're lying about everything.
And real quick before we go, it's this week's episode of Eric Boehlert is right and Rude Pundit is wrong, as usual. You retweeted Tristan Snell, who said Southwest MAGA pilot says, let's go Brandon on the plane intercom. Then the airlines are surprised when the planes turn into unruly Trump rallies. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And you said, excellent point. MAGA pilots clearly putting staff in danger as MAGA passengers rampage. I mean, since when is it okay to say the president? I said, honestly, if someone said, you know, Trump, a pilot, I would agree with it, but not think it was appropriate and think he should be fired.
And it wouldn't be appropriate if Democrats were beating up flight attendants every day. I mean, these pilots are just I mean, there's a clear class divide. These pilots are on one side and they're feeding this rage and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Long as usual, because I love you. Goodbye, Eric. Eric Boehlert.